Welcome, guys. This is the RBT podcast, episode 2. Today, we are talking about sleep. Obviously, everyone wants to talk about calories and training and all the rest of it. But you know what? If you don't get your sleep on point, everything else doesn't really matter because you're going to overeat. You're not going to train very well. And we have Ryan here from the South Melbourne RBT, Ryan Wilson Performance. He's an expert on sleep. Well, he's an expert for me on sleep anyway. I see him napping all the time, so that must be his expert status. What's up, Ryan? How you doing, buddy?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Awesome, mate. And we have Ben Cant here as well. Ben, welcome, mate.
Thanks, mate.
Awesome, guys. So strap in, guys. We're going to talk about why sleep is important. We're going to talk about how you can implement some certain strategies and really why you need to and why should you implement these strategies to get fat loss happening faster and to get better performance in the gym so you can get those lifts up as well. So Ryan, I think the biggest thing when you're looking at this, man, why do you think sleep is so important?
Yeah, definitely. I think sleep in modern lifestyle is obviously something that the majority of people are underslept, and there is a real big focus on training and calories and all these things that you just touched on then, but without having that foundational support, which is how you recover, which is sleep, you really lose out on a lot of progression. And not only do you lose out on progression, transforming your body is obviously an extended process. You're more likely to cut that duration that you can change your body short by shortchanging yourself on sleep. So that's, I guess, why I would say sleep is such an important pillar.
Cool. And what about yourself, Ben? What do you think about sleep being so important?
Yeah, I mean, look, the way I would just simplify it to any client or, in any seminar is basically to say, listen, the hardest people I ever work with are the ones that have poor sleep. That's all you need to know. Poor sleep is like trying to get results with a client, like squeezing blood out of a stone. And I'm just like, where do you want to be on the spectrum of my clients who get results? Do you want to be up that end of the bell curve where these guys are getting really good results? Or do you want to be down this end where everything we do is hard?
Yeah.
And it's just about getting that skin in the game.
Because I was saying, Ryan, literally just before you jumped on, Ben, you can definitely get results with less sleep. So if you sleep 5 hours a night, you can definitely get results, but you're going to be craving more food. Your performance is going to be worse in the gym. You're going to lose more muscle mass with weight loss than just fat mass. So then your overall end game is going to take longer when you're trying to gain muscle and have that end physique goal. So you can do it, but you're just making it harder. So it's like trying to fight someone with one arm tied behind your back. You'd fight better with two hands in front of you. So why would you not focus on sleep so you can fight fat loss or body transformation with two hands in front of you? I just don't understand why someone would try and achieve a transformation with not having one of the main pillars in place that makes it so much easier. I think that's the biggest reason I love to look at the sleep aspect of it. I'm not the best at sleeping with two young kids and business, and then you are seeing the effects of sleep with the little ones. So I think we can definitely understand it. And Ryan, I think, Friday nights is your lack of sleep. So I don't know, we're probably less now. But with this, man, is there any specific studies that highlighted, sleep, lack of sleep and correlation of decreased fat loss or anything you can see, Ryan?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when we're working with clients here at RBT, it's two major studies, which is people that are in the camp of I'm trying to lose weight. And the interesting study that we had and what they found was that approximately 1 hour of sleep restriction on 5 nights a week, which if we look at most people, that's generally all of us, led to less proportion of fat mass lost in individuals undergoing hypercaloric weight loss. So when they're at a calorie deficit, despite similar weight loss. So basically, to sum that up, what they found is if you're sleeping less than 6 hours a night, 83% of the weight that you lose is going to come from your muscle. If you're sleeping more than 8 hours a night, 81% on average of that weight was coming from fat. So it was really as simple, and me and Benny have run through this, it's as simple as saying to someone you're working with, hey, you're going through all this hard training, you're dieting, you're changing your lifestyle. Do you want to lose weight from muscle or do you want to lose it from fat? And that has a lot of flow-on effects that obviously contribute to that being a problem.
And I know that study, man. I think the funny thing is then people will start going, oh, but can't I just sleep more on the weekends? And that sleep actually had people sleeping more on the weekends as well. And they still had that negative response, right?
Yeah, definitely. And that goes into the same thing where most people think that they can make up a sleep debt, and that only ends up being relatively half as effective when you're trying to play catch-up sleep. So it highlights the importance of consistency and routine and habits around sleep, and being sure that you're aware of how long you're sleeping for each night, which I'm sure we're going to get into a few strategy that. The other study that looked on weight gain. So basically, when we have clients that are trying to add muscle, the goal there is to add as much lean muscle as possible, minimize the fat gain. What they found in the largest, most diverse, healthy sample study to date, under controlled lab conditions, sleep restriction promoted weight gain. And what you see generally with a lot of clients that have to spend time in an extended calorie surplus in order to build muscle, they're more likely, if they're sleep restricted, to go for poorer food choices that are more calorie dense and blow right over their macros. And what that leads to is obviously excessive fat gain, and means that they're going to have to diet sooner than they would have liked, and that's going to limit how much muscle they can put on.
Now, like, without going too sciencey with this, because obviously we want to make sure everyone understands what's going on, that study did talk about, they did see a decrease in leptin by 24%. So, like, this, what does leptin mean? If you're decreasing your leptin by like around 24%, what does that mean to someone's metabolic rate or someone's, energy efficiency? What happens then?
Well, Benny, I might throw you on that one, because I know you got the biochem, so you're probably a better person to answer that.
Look, I mean, all I would, like, for the sake of keeping this simple, Trav, I'll just say, listen, our body has a set of hormones that are designed to tell us our energy storage, so how fat we are, okay? When all things are going well, and if we've overconsumed and we're holding excess body fat, the fat can basically signal the brain and say, hey, you're good here. And that can have a set of physiological outcomes which are designed to decrease food intake, increase energy expenditure, upregulate things like thyroid activity, and our sex hormones in a way that's conducive to achieving normal weight balance. Okay, so that's basically how the system, when it's not broken, is designed to work. And that's why the body will basically defend a certain level of fatness within that as well. So if you try to eat too much, it really does have a set of systems built in to try and assist you to stop eating and move more. Okay, yeah. The system doesn't always work though, and that's what we're really seeing when the rubber meets the road with chronic stress, sleep deprivation, and these kind of things. This is how we break that system. Okay? Yeah. So all of a sudden we have these cravings. We have a sedentary lifestyle that we're combating against. So the odds are stacked against us. And then, when we add this sleep deprivation into the mix, it only gets worse. In fact, it caves exponentially quick, not even linear.
Yeah, with this, like, even when you're going into a calorie deficit over time, leptin is already decreasing. So your metabolic rate or your thyroid function is downregulating it again. So then you add sleep deprivation into the mix, which is just an hour or less or so of sleep. So then leptin's decreasing again. So it's making it even harder to lose fat, or your body's downregulating movement on a daily basis because of it. I think the other thing is, when we're looking at like why are people more hungry, the same study has said there was like 20% increase in ghrelin. So like with ghrelin, if it's increased by 26%, what does that mean, Benny?
So we're just basically going to have that dysregulation of appetite. So again, like we've already, the body's already holding on to enough fat. Okay, in which case it's the signal should be going to the brain to say, you can stay away from extra meals. But when you start getting, these distinctions in ghrelin and leptin, the system's broken. Okay, so we're just going, cool, let's eat more calories. I feel, hungry. I'm not satiated. I'm not satisfied. I'm going for poorer food choices. And then we end up in this hyperpalatable, hypercaloric intake, which only exacerbates the obesity issue.
So the biggest thing is, like, with this study is showing a decrease in leptin, so it's harder to lose weight, and increase in ghrelin making you want to eat more. So now you're eating more and losing less weight. So you're in like it makes it harder for the person to get their desired outcome over time. I think that's the biggest thing we're trying to look at right now.
Yeah, but we could sort of step back a second from looking at the physiology, and just look at the behaviors aspect, because I actually think that's what is an actionable item here for people, and that is when we have this sleep deprivation, okay, we're going to on average consume 200 to 300 calories more per meal in a setting in which perhaps you're not tracking and on top of your game. So that being said, you know, just the general person who's just trying to lose a little bit of weight and trying to eat well, maybe they're doing it a little bit intuitively. They're not, you know, tracking the numbers as such and exerting some form of willpower to stop themselves from over consuming. You give them less sleep and they're basically going to consume on average 200 to 300 calories more per meal. You add that up over the course of meals in the week and you can see how that gets out of hand very quickly.
Well, that ends up being, you know, even if you're having just 3 to 4 meals a day, it's like 7,000 calories a week of excess they're having from sleeping less, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, and there's no positive outcome that's associated with that excess intake. You know what I mean? Because you're dealing with someone who's underslept. Okay, like you're gonna have major fatigue. You know, we're gonna have other issues in the area of life. Training is going to be worse. So it's not like you're getting the added benefits of just going, hey, I'm going to go on a hypercaloric diet, consume a lot more calories for the sake of, you know, enjoying myself and maybe having some improved benefits with recovery or performance that you were looking for.
Yeah.
No positives, all negatives.
Cool. So when you're looking at this, Ryan, what do you think is the minimum amount of sleep people should be looking for on a nightly basis?
Yeah, definitely. Just to touch on that last one, I think especially like now what we have is like a time of year, Christmas, where people are going to be exposed to the most amount of food they're going to be exposed to all year. It's going to be the most caloric dense. You have those changes in those hormones regulating appetite. People are most likely to be intuitively eating at this time of year as well. It's like personally, I have the most clients saying, look, I'm going to not track the numbers specifically this year. Let's leave it to January. So they're already eating by feel. If you underslept during this period over Christmas, you're 100% more likely to fall victim in an environment that promotes overeating.
Or it's probably the time of the year you probably should track the most. You know, if you're trying to get a result. If you're trying to get a result, that is, right?
Yeah, now's the time to at least hit your maintenance calories and keep an eye on those things. If you underslept, you're obviously making that a whole lot harder for yourself. In terms of the hours of sleep, so minimum of 8 hours, so 7.5 hours looks like a passable mark. But then if you add hard training into the mix, definitely looking at 8 hours, 8 to 9 hours, and that's a bit person dependent as well.
Okay, cool. So what's the, like do you have any look at the performance effects or the cognitive effects of sleep as far as how that impacts people on a daily basis?
Yeah, definitely. So generally speaking, I've got a bit of a list here. And we highlighted stuff that's basically a health hazard. So stuff that's going to kill you quicker, which is obviously no good. Things that are going to affect your performance. So things like increase in blood pressure, increased cardiovascular risk, increased Alzheimer's risk of cancer, severity and risk of depression and immune function. Those are all things that are going to obviously affect your health long-term, something to avoid. And then you have things like decreased physical performance, time to exhaustion, emotional regulation, mood and stress management, which is a huge one when we look at nutrition decisions, muscle hypertrophy, decreased concentration. So a lot of those factors are going to affect both your performance in the gym, your ability to tolerate pain, your ability to sustain endurance during Metcon workouts, for instance, run at RBT, as well as make consistent nutritional decisions throughout the day. So it's almost like that perfect storm of both factors being hit. Yeah,
cool. What about yourself, Ben? What do you reckon?
Yeah, I just sort of like expand on that to like injury management perspective. You know, I know I talk about this when I talk to the trainers and I say, listen, like your underslept members, 1.7 times more likely to have an injury. Okay. And so that's, something that we obviously want to address. And, furthermore, when it comes to things like skill acquisition. So when someone's doing, weights training, resistance, doesn't matter, whatever type of training they do, there's a skill to it. Okay. Where we're constantly evolving and learning skills. And part of the way that sleep really integrates with like memory and skill acquisition is that, something that you learn in a given day. So let's say a trainer has a member down on the floor, spending some time with them, cueing and improving technique on a deadlift.
Yep.
Okay. We see a great change in the form, in the technique. And now all things going well, if that member goes home, gets to bed nice and early and gets a good 7 to 8 hours of sleep, what basically happens is we take a lot of the things we've learned and we consolidate them in our deep sleep. Okay. Now we get more deep sleep before midnight. And this is where sleep before midnight is a little bit different from the sleep we get after and sort of towards the early hours of the morning. So in that consolidation process, we're really taking things from short-term memory into long-term memory. It's like taking it off the USB stick and putting it into the big hard drive, okay? And this has to happen every single day. But then in the morning, what we get is this integration of that newly acquired knowledge and skills with the catalog or the library of everything you've learned before it. So think about all the other sessions and advice and cueing that members received from, you know, the trainers and their journey through health and fitness. What's going on is it's that integration process in the early hours of the morning. So this is, you know, and I know Ryan and I both play this game a little bit with when we're talking to people about sleep. It's like, well, what would you prefer to sacrifice? You know, going to bed late at night and sacrificing some of that deep sleep, or having to wake up early and sacrificing some of that sleep in the early hours of the morning? Because really, there's no good answer there. It's a lose-lose. Okay, so you know, that's an important aspect that carries over, by the way, with any form of learning. So, you know, I always relate this back to whatever's important in the member's life. Do you know what I mean? Like, is it you're going to go to a job interview, you're learning new things at work, or, you know, whatever it is. Maybe you're having problems with memory and recall of people's names. Okay, these are all some of the aspects of like what we, how sleep integrates with all that.
Yeah, man, it was so interesting. I obviously knew that I was doing this podcast. I was reading a bunch of studies before we sort of started. And one of the things I thought was interesting was skill acquisition. They did a study on a college basketball team, and they made them stay in bed for 10 hours a night. And sleep went from 6.6 hours to 8.4 hours on average on a night. Now, over that study, improvements of sprint times went up by 0.7 seconds. Free throw and three-point accuracy went up by 9%. Reaction time increased by 13%. And obviously they felt better. Then they did another study on college tennis players, and essentially they went to 9 hours, including like day naps. So it went from 7.1 to 9.1 hours. Serving accuracy went up by 14.3%. Like, so if we're looking at things like this, now people aren't playing basketball and playing tennis right now when they're listening, but they're doing everything else. If they're doing a power clean, if they're doing anything that has some form of skill acquisition and any type of accuracy, even if you're playing with your kids and your kids falling off the monkey bars, like if I'm moving faster to save that kid because I slept better, like that's what it's all about. And I think, you know, those stats are pretty crazy. If you can improve by more than 10% just because you increase your sleep by an hour, like that's a pretty crazy stat. And it's just actually getting your head on the pillow.
And I think what's important here, and this is kind of analogous to something we highlighted in the first podcast, Trav, when we were talking about some general nutrition stuff in conjunction with end of year, the silly season. And that is that, you know, performance is something in which you can eat like crap and still go out there and have a really good performance, okay? There are certain individuals in this world, they're going to be Olympic athletes no matter what they eat, okay? And there are certain individuals in this world that are going to be at that level in spite of poor sleep. But that doesn't make it, okay, that the objective from a general population perspective. Like, we don't want to use that. And that's what we'll find amongst, particularly with poor sleepers, is this badge of honor these days, right? And so they'll defend that position. And I know Ryan's talked about this before when he's been teaching the coaches about somebody's got a clinic over in the States where Ryan, what is that?
Yeah, so I saw, I read Sachin Panda, that was in his book, The Circadian Code, and he was talking about one of his colleagues has a sleep lab open to anyone that thinks that they can perform optimally or as well as they did pre-testing with less than 6 hours sleep, and he hasn't found anyone that can maintain their cognitive performance, even though despite obviously a lot of us do claim to be able to operate optimally off less than 6 hours sleep. So
and that just goes to show the discrepancy when you don't have that sleep. So when you're sleep deprived, you lose that subjective analysis accuracy on yourself. Okay, it's like, I'm okay, I do this. But what we see in a really overwhelming sense of the literature is not that whatsoever. And that given the opportunity, if we can put poor sleepers in a routine where they improve their sleep across the board, everything, and I mean everything, basically improves.
But I think with this, the funny thing is some people have slept poorly for so long, they don't know to feel like if they slept well. So it's like if I've had bad sleep for the last 2, 3, 4, 10 years, my familiarity kicks in. It's like, when you buy a brand new car, you love that car. All of a sudden you park away from other cars so no one scratches it. And then over time, someone scratches that car 6 months later, and then 12 months later, essentially, got 3 or 4 scratches, and now it's just a car. And all of a sudden, you treat it differently. And the same with our sleep. It's like if you used to sleep great, you're like amazing, and then over time, you might have started sleeping poorly. 1 night, 2 nights, you're like, oh, I feel a bit off. And then 6 months later, 2 years later, 10 years later, this is just your life. You wake up, you have low energy, you overeat, you're training before, you get injured and niggled all the time. And it's like, this is just what life is. And if they can actually change their sleep hygiene or, sleep tactics and feel what life could be like, all of a sudden they could feel superhuman essentially with their energy, their mood and their training performance, but they just don't know that that's even possible anymore.
And this is something me and Ben have touched on, with clients, when working with clients. You ask someone how do you sleep on holidays? And most people, well, first off, you lead off with how do you sleep now? And most people are going to tell you, yeah, it's fine. I sleep fine. I can perform well day to day. And then you pose them a question. It's like, well, how do you sleep on holidays? And you always get the response. It's like, oh, I sleep 10 hours. I'm playing. And you can tell is that person's playing catch up on holidays and they're sleeping 10 hours. And what you usually find is then that eventually levels out if they're going on a 3-4 week holiday. But they always feel better because of it. They're always talking about I feel so good, so much energy. And usually what happens, this is even the funniest thing, is we have a lot of clients that will go away on holidays, sleep really well, eat intuitively, come back and have lost weight. And what's happened? They've decreased their stress, they've increased their sleep, they've probably decreased their incidental eating across the day. And when they come back, they go what happened here? So a lot of the times we are trying to bring obviously that sleep environment that they're getting out on holidays back here.
So if we're looking at this, for anyone listening, to get skin in the game of why you should, listen to these sleep hygiene and sleep tactics we're going to talk about next, the skin in the game is if you're going to train over the next sort of 12 weeks and try and lose body fat, instead of losing a higher percentage of muscle mass, you lose a higher percentage of fat mass whilst in that calorie deficit. You're going to start craving less food all of the time. Your metabolic rate will be a little bit more stable. You probably will be less of an asshole or a bitch to your partner because your mood will be more stable. I think that's a big thing because our moods are unstable as well. People at work will probably like you more. You might even make a friend because your mood is more stable as well.
That's actually completely true. What you're saying right now. So, Matthew Walker has described this brilliantly on many podcasts and in his book. And he's a sleep neuroscientist researcher. His lab has published a lot of literature, but, he describes it as, in a loneliness aspect. Okay. Cause he's really interested in that field. And basically when you're underslept, and if strangers were to completely, who don't know you, but to guess, how lonely you were, you appear more lonely. And even worse than that, you're less approachable. So instinctually within us, when someone is underslept, they are less approachable for that person. And this is something that comes back to, so I talk about this with our trainers because obviously shifting from let's say a normal career into one where you're a trainer and maybe having to get up quite early, we're always talking to the guys about, look, if you're going to last in the long run here, we really need to protect your sleep, okay? Because as a coach who's working with either one-on-ones or in a group setting, if you're underslept, you're not approachable, okay?
if you're an asshole, you lose clients.
So maybe it's not the tattoos, it's not the shaved head, it's not the couple of kilos of extra muscle, Trav. It was just we were just unapproachable a few years back because we were underslept.
Exactly. It was just a mood. It was a mood frequency coming off of me because I wasn't sleeping enough. But honestly, guys, I think this is one of the biggest things, right? If you become a happier person and more approachable person, I think normally we look at the extremes in society with everything, right? So we look at the people that sleep all the time, look, they're great. And then we look at the people who are heavily underslept. So I remember when Liv was underslept, she crazy stuff when people you see these sad stories, a mum's underslept and she forgets to she leaves her kid in the car, crazy shit like that. But like Liv literally would be like forgetting that there was even petrol in the car. There wasn't petrol in the car. There'd be so many times she nearly didn't like get home because she like, you're cognitively not there. She was getting injured more. Like Ryan was actually training with when just after we had Finn, and like she was getting injured a lot because her sleep was so poor because of it. So like we look at, that's an extreme, like a mum having a new baby. But then like the rest of the population, 1 hour won't make a difference. Like Ryan just said it before, like 1 hour makes a massive difference. Going from 7 to 8 hours or 6.5 to 7.5 hours can dramatically shift, help dramatically shift the body composition.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess when you look at that, it's also like, what's the quality of the sleep that you're getting? And a lot of the times when you have someone track their sleep, it's, it's tracking it when they enter their bed, but they might be using, their laptop or phone or whatever in bed. So if you're trying to track your sleep, you really need to track it from the second that you decide that, hey, that's it, I'm actually going to bed now. This is the time. So you can get an accurate gauge of how long you've been sleeping for, because it does make everything so much harder. And if you do start to track things, you can start to measure them, adjust them, and you're more likely to obviously make a change off that.
So then some people might be going, you know what, like I'm good. Even if I'm craving more food, I've got the discipline to not overeat and, all the rest of it. But also sleep has an effect of, performance, right? So workload tolerance decreases, fatigue resistance changes. Like, so if you can't put the same work ethic in the gym, that's going to have an effect on your body fat loss or composition as well, right, Ryan?
Absolutely. And one of those things is for clients that say that they have the willpower to outlast sleep, they're so wrong. Your body is so well versed to fight against that sort of fatigue. And basically what it is just chronic death. So your body's not going to allow you to chronically undersleep. Your willpower won't survive that. And anyone that's been through a similar position will know. But yeah, you get a decreased time to exhaustion, a decreased performance, physical performance. So measure that as a result of like reps to failure. You got a decrease in your aerobic output, a decrease in your need. So, decreasing across basically every domain of physical fitness. And if you have a decrease in your physical fitness and a decrease in your ability to recover from the work that you're doing, you have a decreased ability to adapt to what you're doing. And depending on your level of your training age, this can sort of manifest itself in either A, an injury, B, a plateau, or C, a regression. You could just end up going backwards. And you see that in advanced lifters. They get to a certain point, they've got to that point being underslept, and that point will no longer afford them the same level of progress. So yeah, you have a decrease across all those domains.
Awesome. Do you have anything to add to that, Benny?
No, I think you just sort of touched on before, well, Ryan did that, what you track and measure, you can improve. And so, every single one of my clients tracks at least total sleep through either an app on the phone or a wearable device. And then at least we get a bit of insight as to whether or not this is an issue. And I would just take it one step further, just, providing some anecdotal experience on my behalf from coaching a lot of people with sleep issues is, I would go so far to say that on average, an increase of 15 minutes, not even an hour, of 15 minutes per night across the week affords or lends itself to improvements in other key performance indicators that I'm looking at, and even, subjectively how that client feels. Okay. So, if I get someone who's starting off on average at 5.5 hours sleep per night, I literally mean if I can shift that person to 5.75 hours, it's already like good or better. Yeah. And therefore we gain momentum and skin in the game to keep improving it up to what we would consider an optimal amount, that being somewhere between 7 and 8 hours sleep.
So when we're looking at this, guys, what's like there's no perfect time, but what time should people try and get to bed, Ryan?
So Ben's giving me a lot of information on this, but basically you're trying to mimic the light-dark cycle as much as possible. So that's going to strengthen your circadian rhythm. So obviously this is going to be relative to what a person can practically and realistically implement, but I would say obviously this is going to be seasonal. So during the summer, maybe somewhere between like 9 and 10 p.m. could be all right. And it's also determined by when you wake up, so your total duration. And then in the winter, allowing yourself to sleep in a little longer, going to bed sooner after the sun's down. So somewhere around similar, like anywhere between, I'd say 8:30 to 9:30 at night is a good sort of target.
Awesome. Benny, all good?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, just to expand a little bit on that is just to kind of set the scene in that what's happened over, let's call it the digital age. Okay. Yeah. So, where we're at right now is basically it's an endless day rather than a succinct day and a succinct night. Okay. So our exposure to light has changed so dramatically in the last 110 years or whatever it is now since we kind of invented the light globe. Okay. And we've gone through, we went through the, agricultural age into the industrial age, and now we're in the digital age. And what we now have is many of us work indoors, okay, with not the same level of exposure to the strength or the intensity and spectrum of light that is contained within natural sunlight. And the sunlight is, this light-dark cycle is a Zeitgeber, meaning it's a cue for the internal time management systems in the body that help regulate our health and everything that we've already talked about. So I'm forever talking to clients about perhaps downloading what's called like an app like D-Minder, which is a sunlight exposure app to help you optimize your vitamin D levels. Now, the reason I like this is obviously we have to toe the line here and be careful about sun exposure as well for, skin cancer risk and things like that. But
I'm just going to mention that the reason why you're saying that is you don't want someone to start hating you, telling you people are going to get outside and get in the sun. Yeah. People are going to start saying, Benny, you're telling everyone to go get cancer.
I know. That's exactly why I preface it. But look, in the D-Minder app, you can put in your, your previous vitamin D levels, your skin color, like how much clothing you wear, and it can help you kind of optimize your time spent in sunlight given your location and the weather on any given day. Now, that's a really cool experiment to help some people or members realize, wow, I really do not get much sun exposure whatsoever. Now, what this does, instead of creating a nice peak with our circadian rhythm of alertness and, arousal in terms of, it's time to go out and do things during the day, we never really get that. So it's sort of dimmed down a little bit. And then to make it worse, what's happening is we're exposed to these artificial light sources after the sun sets, which basically suppresses our melatonin, this hormone that we release throughout the night to, assist with a lot of recovery and repair processes that occur within the brain and the body. So actionable items on this front are moderating an adequate level of sun exposure or light exposure through the day. Now, we might be habit stacking that with getting outside, some stress management. We kind of alluded to this in the last podcast, Trav. That can all be like a really positive little habit that we go and do that can assist us with that. And whatever ways that we can mitigate that exposure to artificial light after dark, especially the screens. The screen's the big one because they're very high in the spectrum of light, the blue light spectrum, and that'll really suppress that melatonin. So some actionable things that I have my clients do is, they might put the, what are they called? Like the Flux app or the night mode on their devices. I don't actually trust either of those. Okay. They don't release the stats. I can tell you from my experience with clients that they do not get the same effect as if they're not switched on whatsoever.
Yep.
I think a step up from there is to get yourself a set of blue blocking visors. Okay. Yes, you're going to look weird. You're going to look like an X-Man. That's okay. You know what I mean? But like nearly everyone I've given those, and I don't like being that little device guy. It's really, I don't want to get known for that, but this is a piece of tech which is relatively cheap, very easy to use and build the habit. And usually within 7 days, I will have a client turn around and they will tell me the kind of impact that it's made upon their sleep patterns.
Yep.
So I like it for that reason.
I think everyone moves to supplementation really fast, right? So if you're going to start buying melatonin and start supplementing with that, you can start by just buying some blue blocker glasses and just throw them on to start with and see how that changes it before you start having to take pills for the rest of your life so you can sleep better. Now,
exactly.
with this, man, going on about the melatonin, obviously, if you look at, creating your environment to help support that, melatonin will increase and help you get to sleep. You look at Vegas, if anyone's ever been to Vegas, that whole, I don't know if you guys have been to Vegas. Have you been to Vegas, Ryan?
No, I haven't.
Benny, you been to Vegas?
I thought you were going to start talking about the vagus nerve, but
No.
which pretty much tells you that I haven't been to Vegas.
Well, what happens when you go to Vegas? Like it could be like 3 a.m. and you don't even know it's 3 a.m. You think it's like midday, and like you don't get tired. Like you just keep going and going. I swear that whole environment there's like bells ringing, lights are on, flashing in front of your face, and the whole thing is there I feel to suppress melatonin and make you just stay awake the whole time, and you lose complete track of time. Now, I feel like some people's environment in their house is very similar to Vegas these days. Fucking lights
Ryan's got a really good example of that. What is it, Ryan? The this versus that that we use with clients and members.
So, like in terms of that Vegas, like at my old place, so I couldn't fall asleep. This was when I was coaching with Bang. I couldn't fall asleep, and I kept opening my eyes, and then one day I opened my eyes. There's a crack in the curtain right next to my bed, and through it I can see the Melbourne Eye. It's lighting up and going crazy. I was like, that's what that is. So in terms of getting essentially skin the game, like what you're looking for is like lifestyle substitutions clients can make to actually make a difference in their sleep. There's a couple of different options here. So like, for instance, if you put to someone like, yes, you're going to use the screen before you go to bed. That's what's realistic for you, is playing something like Fortnite or a video game versus watching something like David Attenborough. What's going to be more stimulating? So that's an example of both are blue lit emitted devices. One is far more psychologically engaging. It plays off like Fortnite looks like Vegas in a video game. So it's all about colors and it's outdoors. So that's an option. And then you look at, further down from that, something like Game of Thrones versus reading under candlelight. And that's candlelight emits a light wave that's similar to exactly wearing those blue blockers. So you can see how something's less psychologically involving and one is not being the victim or using that blue light. And then the third one, this is more so stress, is, are you having arguments before bed, or are you getting into a sleep routine comfortably and setting yourself up for a good night of sleep? So they're just a few scenarios that I pose to clients when I try to change or give them strategies to change their sleep environment.
Yeah, because look, I think Ryan and I would be on the same page with this. Is that often when you're dealing with someone who's underslept, they tell you they've tried everything. And it's just not true. Okay, it's because like what we tend to see is like a half-ass attempt at like, I tried to go to bed early for one night. I basically stared at the ceiling for like 3 hours. What a waste of time that was. This is not for me. I'm okay. Okay, and so there's a bunch of that's the story that they're telling themselves. And so, when we're creating this skin in the game, creating value, tracking it as a metric or a KPI that we know that we can improve, these are the kind of habits, substitutions that we're looking for, these behaviors. It's like, right, stop checking your phone. Okay. Like we've got to have these boundaries. Like, okay, when do emails stop? Okay. When does social media stop? Okay. And what you're basically doing is we're looking to see some things can be abstained, like removed straight away. That's out. That's a clear boundary. Other things might be moderated or titrated. And this kind of, again, comes back to what we talked about with nutrition, moderation versus abstinence for some people. So, if we can get people using or to stop using overhead lighting, to switch off, electric or digital devices earlier, to use things like flame or candle or, any of those lower, we actually use Himalayan salt lamps in our house. And it's not because they have some kind of witchcraft. It's because they create a red glow. Although I tell some really interesting stories to our mates and visitors. It's completely untrue, by the way, when they listen to this. But literally, because that red glow is it's very relaxing. Okay. There's something I know when I'm in front of a fire, it's hypnotic. You know what I mean? I like to stare at it. It's very peaceful and calming. Whereas, if I got onto, the PlayStation or, anything like that, fighting games or drama on TV, like those kind of shows that, like reality TV shows, like worse.
Liv cannot sleep after watching a thriller because she's like, oh my gosh. She's like, can we watch something like Big Bang Theory now before we go to sleep? Because I feel like I just need to calm the fuck down. So it's like, it's not watching those shows. They're going to get you pumped up or get you like your heart rate buzzing. I think for me, I find sleep environment so crucial. From where we were, like we just moved, we were living like on Beaconsfield Parade with like cars roaring down past us nonstop on the beach. But also the difference between when I had the blinds up and versus the blinds down. Like, I think a lot of people don't realize the difference. If you've got street lights coming into your room, wherever you are, like I used to wake up like 3-4 times a night. I'd be like, oh shit, I forgot to put down the blinds, and I sleep so well. But then I don't get forced to wake up as well because my sleep is so much rested as well. I feel like so much more rejuvenated in the morning. So I think like when we're looking at optimizing your sleep environment, what are the key things that you should look like in a room, Ryan? What do you reckon?
Yeah, so I guess when you're looking at sleep quality, it's not only just duration, it's the timing, which we touched on, the circadian rhythm, and also the quality. And the best measure of quality, even if you're looking at tracking things, is always going to be, how do you wake up in the morning? Do you feel refreshed and rejuvenated? So in terms of creating a sleep environment that's optimal, what you're looking for is a cool environment. So you don't want to have a lot of hot air coming in. You're not trying to blast the heater. You're sleeping in a naturally cool environment. You're minimizing that blue light exposure, that overhead light exposure. You're trying to remove or treat the bedroom as a place of rest and of sleep. And what that means is in your day-to-day life, you're not trying to spend too much time in your bedroom for other things. So looking at those things, that's what you're trying to create within your environment before you take a step back and you start looking at strategies you can implement to assist you sleep further.
So, like, I guess, so it's making sure you're in dark room, making sure you're starting to get rid of blue light, making sure, so that before you start even doing any type of supplementation, you have to create an environment first and like try that out.
I think people shouldn't really be playing around with supplementation.
Yeah.
Like when it comes to sleep, I'm very wary of a lot of supplements out there. Not that there are gaps in the literature, for instance, even with melatonin. Like I've seen studies in rats, which when they gave them melatonin, I think they infused it, but then they exposed them to blue light. Like there was actually more oxidative stress and damage. And I'm like, okay, so I don't have any human data on this, but what happens if my clients are taking melatonin and then staying up playing Fortnite? You know what I mean? Like what happens if 5 years down the track, we discover like that is the absolute worst case scenario for someone. So, and melatonin, it's a hormone. You got to take it it's a serious thing. Okay. Yeah. So, that sleep environment, these are the foundational low-hanging fruit that people don't want to do, but they have to do.
Because everyone wants to out-supplement a poor sleep hygiene, right?
That's exactly right. And, some of my clients have to have their phones out of their room. It's that anticipatory anxiety of basically, I think literally they interviewed school kids and over like 70 to 80% of them owned up to checking their phone at least once in the middle of night to check social media. Okay. And these are teenagers, they're at a very vulnerable time in their lives when it comes to sleep, which we won't get into in this podcast. But, the same thing goes for adults is that, if we have an issue with the screens or, the phone, it should be outside the bedroom. And building on what Ryan's saying is like the bedroom's really only for sleeping and sex. Okay. That's it. If there's a TV in the bedroom, okay, again, we're creating this environment where part of that habit is staying awake and being engaged with whatever's being watched on TV. TV's got to go.
Yeah. I think when we're looking at that, man, like, so you were saying before, Ryan, before we get into that, but first, before you actually ever do anything, whenever you're trying to do any type of mobilization or anything like that with a client, say you're doing a squat and then you want to try and mobilize them and then do a squat afterwards, you do the first squat to start to see where the starting point is so they can see the difference. So before someone changes their sleep, they need to go through some form of sleep recording of what it feels like with the current sleep. So it's like record for the next 3 days. It's like, what time did you go to bed? What time did you wake up? How many times did you wake up? Rate 1 to 10, how alert are you when you wake up? So they can see a before, and then they start to implement sleep hygiene, and then they can see what there is after. So now it's like night and day. They go, oh, I actually do feel better. So there is a before and after approach, just like any type of change you do with anything. With this, I think like moving into some form of parasympathetic activity, so some type of wind down, do you give anyone any type of meditation they can start to do or some breath work? Do you think that's beneficial, Ryan?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everything's person dependent, and different strategies, especially when it comes to stress reduction before bed, are going to work for individuals based on their own temperament and what they have going on in their life. So some things I like to experiment with is like job diary. So I do this myself. I write all my to-do lists out before I go to bed, outside of the bedroom, at my desk. There's things like music. There's things like taking a warm bath or a shower, and this has the double effect of, heat dissipation. So for yourself, one of the physiological ways that you need mechanisms of falling asleep is a decrease in your core body temperature. So a warm bath or shower can help with this, but it's also something that's relaxing. Music and establishing, more than anything, is establishing a regular solid routine so you can actually tell your body psychologically, because a lot of the times when we have people that are keeping themselves up at night, it's out of habit and it's out of almost like a stubbornness to change. So if you have a solid sleep routine, whatever that is, gratefulness journaling, meditation, using an app like that, it needs to be something that's regular, consistent, and tells your body and your mind that it's time to go to bed, it's time to start winding down.
I have a picture in my mind of Ryan sitting in a bath right now with some candles, listening to some form of Beethoven as he's going to bed. Is this your sleep routine then?
No, psytrance. I got into a habit of taking a bath and listening to psytrance, but my sleep routine personally is just like, I've only found a small combination of strategies. Is like job diary, basically like putting my phone on the floor, and then I'm out. Like, done. That I fall asleep in a second.
So we alluded to some habit stuff last podcast as well, Ben, but I think like when you look at any type of habits, you can habit stack. So like when you wake up, you have a series of habits that you can stack on top of each other, and you can habit stack up to 10 habits, which is like just becomes a ritual, right? So it's like a sleep ritual, or it's a waking ritual. So it's like I wake up, I drink a glass of water, I brush my teeth, I have a shower, I put clothes on. Like that's like this thing we don't even think about, but some people have these rituals. But over time, you might consciously, you could write it out, your sleep ritual, and then you can just go, I'm going to follow this, I'm going to follow this. And then over time, you don't even have to think about it anymore. This is just my ritual, right? It's like 8:45. Or 7:45, I put on the dim lights. It could be like 8 o'clock, I write some stuff down. 8:15, I jump in a warm bath or a warm shower. 8:30, I listen to some, nice music. 8:40, you have this routine that all of a sudden is optimizing your whole environment to just sleep. And now this is life. So Ben, what about yourself? Do you have a specific wind down routine that you like?
Yeah, no, it changes. So I consider it's like in flux. It's dynamic. It's not something that you have to pick one method, and then when it doesn't work anymore, or you're struggling to commit yourself to that given method, that you can't try and put something else in. I remember there was a time when I lived very close to work. Okay, so literally 3 minutes away from work. I was having the interesting problem. This is very much like a first world problem of like. It would come to 5 o'clock or whatever time I was knocking off, and I would shut the computer screens down. I would drive home. I'd be there before, 2 traffic lights, and I'm there. And I would walk in the door, and my mind would still be going a million miles an hour. And what I would brought into my home, into my safe spot, my haven, was just a version of myself that wasn't there yet. I wasn't present. I was still trying to close down the tabs, in my mind. And so, what I started doing was, listening to some classical music, which I love, in the car. And then I would basically listen to another 2 or 3 songs, just closing my eyes, doing some breath work before I would enter into my house. And I would just bring a version of myself home that was present and much, much calmer. Okay, ready to basically start that wind down process. And this is the thing with sleep hygiene and these habits is people try to start them too late. Okay? Yeah. And it really starts, it starts in the morning. Okay, so it really does start in the morning. But that's what I did. And then I sort of, I brought it even further forwards by then I started shutting down all my screens 15 minutes before I left work, and I started doing it at work. So then by the time I got in the car, I was driving home slower now. Okay. I was literally driving Miss Daisy on the way home. I was just far more chilled out. So those are some of the things that, if you really have trouble just leaving work at work, that worked very well for me. These days, what I'm doing is actually, that's not a problem. So to help me get to sleep at night, I've got an audio book in my ear of a fiction. Okay. So something, and it's actually something, it's got to be something I've already read before. And now I have no vested interest in knowing how this story ends. Okay. Yeah. Or even the minutia, the details of the storyline, because I've already read it. Okay. So, but what it does is it just provides me with this really slow, kind of steady, and then I'm usually out very quickly. And then I turn off the audiobook and I'm done. So, that's something that's been working really well for me. And just to touch on what Ryan talked about before with body temperature, that's probably my main issue is that, I run very hot. It's very hard for me to cool down. Having just, Ruben's 4 weeks old tomorrow. So I've got like a newborn in the house. I can't go pumping the air conditioner anymore.
Yeah.
I'm in the spare bed for the time being. So talking about what Ryan pointed out before, it's a different environment. I'm struggling to go into a deeper sleep. One of the things I'm actually going to look at is a chili pad. Okay. So that's sort of a mat that can cool you down that you can put on the mattress, because I don't want to be pumping the aircon, on Ruben's, airways right now. And, Zoe's going to kill me. So, I'm going to figure out another solution to that.
It's the amount of times that Liv said to me, "You're so hot. Don't touch me in bed." Yeah. It's ridiculous, right? It's like, why are you always so hot? Like, what's wrong with you? I was like, I don't know. I'm just hot. Just stop telling me I'm not to touch you. Yeah. But like for me, like I literally sleep no blanket, just laying there on my bed. Just that's how I sleep. And it was like got the rug over her and all the rest of it. It's like I just can't sleep with a rug over me because I am always running at a different temperature. But I think with this, like I had trouble sleeping for a long time. Yes, I got the blue blockers. Yes, we just watch TV out in the TV area. Yes, now I don't have my phone in the room. Yes, essentially like people say to me, it's like, oh, but I need my phone next to me because it's my alarm. I'm like, if your phone is in with arm reaching distance and it is your alarm, that's something that's probably the worst thing because that's when you press snooze as well.
Yeah, but see, Trav, we're getting old these days, man. We don't have to remind some of the younger viewers that there is actually these things that are just called alarms.
Exactly, it's got alarm.
You know what I mean? Yeah. There's these. It's like calculators, right? There's actually used to be this device that had this kind of like smaller screen on it and big buttons you used to press.
Yeah. But like, I know. But like with this, like I use my phone, my alarm, but I put it at the door of the room. So when my alarm goes off, I actually have to get out of bed, which means it's less likely that I press snooze because now I'm up. So it's actually a better thing if my alarm is at the door of my room as well. But then I used to actually, for a while, I listened to either Headspace as a sleep meditation as a 10-minute one, or I had this guy, like a guided 30-minute meditation. I don't think I've ever listened to the end of it because I always just like zoned out from it. But I started now lately counting from 1,000 down. I was like, I'll just lay there and I'll just literally start counting from 1,000 down to zero. It's literally like counting sheep. I don't think I've ever hit 900. Like I've never hit 900 because I'm just out because you're laughing at my sleep routine right now. But like for me, but also I have a heavy carb dinner every night. Like that's for me, like I have a heavy carb dinner. And is there anything in that as far as having a heavier carb dinner and getting to sleep better?
Yeah, there is actually. But I don't think we should get into the science of it given
coming
like up on an hour. Yeah, generally speaking, there is. So we do have a, what you could kind of, quotation marks here, talk like a sedative effect from having a carbohydrate meal later in the evening for some people, not everyone. But it's something that I've used with clients that have sleep problems.
Well, there you go. So you could do that. But for me, then I just count down from 1,000. I'm feeling fantastic. As of like, I think it's like 970, I'm normally out. So I'm like, okay, I'm out now. And that's it, because like it's a routine now. And I think the biggest thing is that we have to get across is you're creating a routine, and the more you do that routine, the more it becomes natural. So the more it becomes natural, this is now a habit in your life. And then it just automatically, your brain's signaling at 8:45, this is what happens. And it's already preparing itself ready to go to sleep because it's used to this pattern in your life. So I think the more and more you practice the pattern, the more your body starts to prepare itself to actually go to sleep, right? And I think most people try a sleep routine once, like you were saying, Benny, and then all of a sudden, it didn't work. It's like, no, you have to try it more than once. And yes, like
you have to train the circadian rhythm. You know what I mean? So the light dark cycle is the, kind of the biggest one, but the way that you structure your day is also very important. So for instance, if you eat meals at the same time every day, that strengthens your circadian rhythm. And what I mean by that, I'm not saying eat more meals, just for clarity. What I'm saying is if breakfast is always at 8 a.m., you know what I mean? A snack is always at 11 a.m., lunch is always at 1:30 p.m. That kind of structure only strengthens this system for you. Training is actually an incredibly good Zeitgeber, so a circadian cue as well. Now, I know not everyone is afforded the luxury of training at the same time every day, but if you are, that can be something that you can try and consider to make more, done at a similar time. All this working together with a solid sleep hygiene routine where you start doing things at the same time will pay dividends. And it's just a case of sticking at it and seeing it through that, whether it's 2 weeks or 2 months, it doesn't matter. You've got to have that consistency, just like everything else in health and fitness.
Well, that's like when you're going to sleep, you need to have, this sort of 15 to half an hour window where you normally go to sleep. And even when you're trying on the weekends, like you shouldn't wake up more than an hour later than you normally wake up. Like you shouldn't sleep until midday. Like that's not
well, no. And then the reason this is called social jet lag. So this is a very big problem in today's society. And Ryan pointed it out right at the start of our chat is that it's very common for someone to sleep 5 to 6 hours or 6.5 hours through the week, and then you'll see them binge sleep on the weekends. But what that's like doing, is if they're waking up 3 hours later on the weekends, that's like literally traveling from Melbourne to Perth, you know what I mean, every single weekend in terms of the disruption that it's doing with your jet lag, okay, with your circadian rhythm. And so this is a real world, real common problem that, when we're working together with people, like, we don't want to sacrifice sleep and then binge it on the weekends. I know that that's the habit that we're doing, but we want to kind of even that out. It's
like binge sleeping. It's a sleeping disorder. Kind of like binge eating disorder.
Yeah, be careful, Trav. But
stop saying things.
In all seriousness, if someone decides to change their bedtime to 3 hours later on the weekends and start waking up 3 hours later, then come Sunday night, you've got to do everything in your power to shift the circadian clock back 3 hours again.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. This is so common yet so nasty.
Yeah, but in saying that, guy, the whole people say I'm going to eat less during the week, and then they do binge on the weekend. But they say that's bad. But so many people go, I'm going to sleep less during the week, and I'm going to sleep more on the weekend. But that's considered normal. That is okay. So it's just you have to use the same essentially philosophy. It's like, no, you should have essentially with your sleep, within an hour. Get to sleep and wake up and make it consistent, because that is how your life should be for optimal performance. Ryan, do you want to add anything? We're coming up to the end of the podcast. Do you have anything you want to share?
Not overly. Probably the last topic that I guess I think is worth touching on is napping. So, everyone's going to be either personally leans towards biphasic, so napping, or monophasic, one big sleep at night. The biggest thing with this is, for PTs or students, obviously we do have a greater knowledge retention and transfer of knowledge with people that nap. And I'd just say the only thing to be careful of is make sure it suits the individual. So if you wake up feeling fresh after a nap, then go nuts. I take a nap every single day religiously for between about 20 to 90 minutes. And every time I wake up, it's better than a coffee. I feel alert. So I'd say for anyone, if you're going to try to test napping, test it, see how you wake up, and see if it affects your sleep that night. And if it doesn't, then it could be a good option for yourself. If it does, then it's probably not something that you want to pursue.
Benny, with napping, is there a certain length of period a nap should go for? And should you have some caffeine before you have a nap?
So to answer the first part of that question, not really. Like, I think, when I'm talking about napping with a client or a member, usually I'm wanting them to have that outcome that Ryan described. Is like, you want to be coming out of that nap feeling rejuvenated. Okay. And that might tie in with like a full sleep cycle or whatever that is. But one of the things, and I think this is actually back when I was coaching Ryan, by the way, So I'm going to kind of jump in here on what he said, is that the discussion that I have with coaches about napping when they've got to get up and do a night evening shift after doing the morning shift is what we accumulate as we are awake is this sleep pressure. So we have this sort of compound that builds up in the body and just starts to make us tired. And you can't outrun this. Eventually, it'll get you. Doesn't matter how many days you try to stay awake, the sleep pressure just gets greater and greater. The only thing that relieves sleep pressure is sleep. So what happens when you nap is you're going to get rid of some of this sleep pressure. And in real world situations, what this means is if you're napping too late in the evening, you're going to wipe off a lot of that sleep pressure and then not have enough time in between your bedtime to start accumulating enough sleep pressure again. And we see this a lot in, from what I can perceive within the literature is in, old people's homes. Okay. Old people, like as we age, we have even more sleep difficulty, but a lot of these homes give them naps that are really late before dinner. And then of course they wake up, they're rejuvenated, I suppose, in a sense, and then they eat and then they have difficulty falling back to sleep.
Yeah.
So for most people, what I would say is you would try to bring that nap forward as much as possible. Okay. So if the nap at 4 p.m. left you struggling to get it sleep at night at your bedtime, try and bring it back to 2 p.m. or 1 p.m. And with PTs, I know we're shifting course here, but let's face it, we're going to have a lot of coaches listening as well. This may mean that they train their clients in their classes in the morning, and then maybe their usual habit was to eat and then train and then have a nap after training. Because let's face it, that's a pretty nice time to have a nap. But then maybe by that time it's 4 p.m. now, and they're getting like an hour and a half in before their evening classes. What could be better is to shift the sleep prior to training. Okay, so sleep earlier, wake up, train, eat, and then before you know it, you've accumulated enough time to get that sleep pressure back to what's needed to optimally fall asleep at night.
Awesome. I would say the only thing not to ever try, which is what I've tried, is polyphasic sleeping. I think that I'm the only crazy person on this podcast that's done that. I slept 20 minutes every 4 hours. So you never have a nighttime. This is like opening an RBT, right? I was like, I need to get more stuff done. So I was listening to Arnold Schwarzenegger. He said, just sleep faster. And I looked at Snoop Dogg, and he was doing polyphasic sleeping and smoking some weed. So then I was like, I'm going to try this polyphasic sleeping thing without the weed. And so I slept 20 minutes every 4 hours, right? And you do this, so you're only sleeping like 4 hours a day. After 2 weeks, I just passed out. I was like off social media for like 48 hours, and like, oh my gosh, TJ is dead. He was off social media for 2 days. And he was like, no, he just fell asleep and just did not wake up. So anyone out there thinking about trying polyphasic sleeping, do not try. I have tried it. It does not work. Well, it didn't work for me, and I don't think it was the most optimal thing for anyone. That is the stupidness to finish this podcast. Well, that is the RBT podcast. Ryan, thanks so much, mate.
No worries. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thanks, Benny.
Thanks for having me, mate.
Awesome, guys. Tune in next time. That was RBT podcast episode 2, talking about sleep.